The stage is washed in a soft amber glow, no more steel guitar drifting through the air, no more applause stretching deep into the night. Only a single microphone, standing quietly in the open space. There was a time when the name Jan Howard echoed through Nashville like a declaration of blunt honesty. She did not sing to please anyone. She sang as though every lyric had been paid for with her own life. But there is something the audience rarely saw. When her duets with Bill Anderson climbed to #1, when the doors of the Grand Ole Opry officially opened to welcome her in 1971, when all of Nashville believed she was standing at her peak. It was that very same year that a phone call tore her life in two. How does a woman stand on stage, singing about love and betrayal, when her own heart has just had a piece of it taken away forever? Some artists are remembered for their awards. Some are remembered for their chart positions. But there are others who are etched into memory for the way they stood firm after life tried to knock them down. Today's story is not only about a country voice of the 1960s. It is the story of a mother, a woman who married too young, an artist who learned how to sing while her heart was breaking. So what truly happened behind the stage lights? And why, though she was never the loudest name in Nashville, does Jan Howard remain one of the bravest women ever to step onto that stage? Let's go back to the beginning. Before the name Jan Howard appeared on posters in Nashville, before the stage lights of the Grand Ole Opry shone across her face, there was a little girl born in 1929 in Missouri, growing up in an America still struggling through economic hardship and war. Her childhood was not wrapped in stability, a poor family, days of scarcity, fractured relationships a child did not yet have the words to define. Some children grow up surrounded by affection, and some grow up in silence. Jan belonged to the latter. She married very young, barely past her teenage years. In that era, marriage was often seen as the only escape for a girl with limited choices. But a marriage entered too early is not always a harbor. Sometimes it is merely another door leading to responsibilities not yet fully understood. She became a mother before she had truly grown into herself. And between strained dinners, financial worries, and arguments that echoed through the house, a quiet question began to form within her. Is this all my life will ever be? Psychologically, women who enter marriage too early often have not yet had the chance to build an independent identity. They move directly from being someone's daughter to someone's wife, then someone's mother. Their identity is always attached to someone else. And when a person has never been allowed to live as herself, she begins searching for an outlet. Not necessarily to leave, but simply to exist. For Jan Howard, music was not a glittering dream. It was a way to prove that she had a voice of her own. Not just a voice within the household, but a voice that could travel beyond the narrow walls of an early marriage. Those early fractures did not destroy her. They created a space, and it was within that space that her voice would eventually rise. Those early fractures did not destroy her. They created a space, and when a space grows large enough, it forces you to fill it with something. For Jan, that something was not another man, not another home, but another city, Los Angeles. Some dreams are nurtured from childhood. For Jan Howard, music did not begin as a dream. It began as a need to leave broken marriages behind, to leave the invisible limits that early life had placed on a woman's shoulders. And she moved to Los Angeles, not with the image of a future star, but as a woman trying to rebuild herself. The city was not gentle. It was loud, competitive, and unforgiving to those without connections. But Jan possessed something no classroom could teach: a voice shaped by experience, not overly polished, not striving to sound sweet, just real. When she sang, people heard the life within it, a woman who had loved, been disappointed, sacrificed, endured. And in a world of country music that told everyday stories, truth carried a power of its own. Small performances gradually drew attention. A recording contract was signed. The studio doors opened. It was not an explosion. It was a door slightly ajar. Then, in 1966, everything shifted. "Evil on Your Mind" hit the radio. The song climbed into the top 5 on the Billboard country chart. And the lyrics were bold, direct, almost defiant. Jan's voice did not beg. It was not fragile, it questioned. And suddenly, Nashville began to take notice. That was her first crescendo, not because she became a star overnight, but because for the first time, the country world had to admit. The woman who once believed she had no choices now had a voice that could not be ignored. "Evil on Your Mind" was not just a hit. It was Jan Howard's official introduction to Nashville. After that song, the door was no longer slightly open. It swung wide. Between recording sessions, television appearances, and charts shifting week by week, another name began appearing beside hers more frequently: Bill Anderson. He was one of the most beloved songwriters and voices of that era. Their collaboration was not loud, not dramatic, but it carried a quiet chemistry, like two storytellers who had lived enough to no longer need theatrics. Then came "For Loving You." The song climbed straight to #1 on the Billboard country chart. Radio played it constantly. Jan Howard's name began to be spoken in the same breath as the biggest stars in the genre. Life accelerated. The schedule grew heavier. The lights shone brighter. The venues filled fuller. And in 1971, a symbolic milestone arrived. She was officially inducted as a member of the Grand Ole Opry. It was not just a stage. It was the sanctuary of country music. It was the place that confirmed you were not merely a one-hit wonder, but part of the history of the genre itself. From a Missouri girl who married too young to a woman standing on the Opry stage with the audience rising to its feet, everything seemed to have fallen into place. A steady career, a solid reputation, respect from the industry. But life rarely arranges itself in a straight line, because in the very year she was most celebrated, in the very moment Nashville officially opened its doors to welcome her, another door slammed shut. And this time, no duet was loud enough to drown out the sound of loss. And then, it happened. Not in a recording studio, not on a stage, not in the sound of applause, but in an ordinary human moment, a phone call. In 1971, the very same year Jan Howard was welcomed as a member of the Grand Ole Opry, she received the news that her son had been killed in the Vietnam War. There are pains you can cry through. There are pains you can speak about. But there are also pains where simply hearing the words makes your entire inner world collapse without a sound. And the cruelest part was this: she was at the height of her career. The lights were still bright. The schedule was still full. The radio still played her familiar songs. People still spoke her name with admiration, as if life had finally granted her a beautiful ending. But no one saw that inside that beautiful ending, a door had just slammed shut. No award can comfort a mother. No chart position can return a child. And yet, she still had to step onto the stage. Because in show business, your grief is not listed on the schedule. It is not permitted to take time off. The curtain still rises. The band still comes in on cue. And the microphone still stands there. A cold, witness. The performances after that carried a different tone. If before, Jan Howard sang like a woman shaped by experience. Now she sang like a woman trying to survive while appearing fine. Her voice began to change, not because of technique, but because of what lived inside her. It moved a little slower, it felt a little heavier, and each lyric seemed stretched by something weighted at the end of her breath. Because after loss, you no longer sing merely to tell a story. You sing to keep yourself from breaking apart. And here is something many listeners never realized. Tragedy does not make an artist sing better. It makes them sing truer. Before tragedy, you still have space to perform, to please the audience, to smile at the right moments, to appear bright on stage, even when you are exhausted inside. But after an irreversible loss, you no longer have the energy to decorate your emotions. You no longer want to conceal them. You are left with one choice: to stand there and tell the truth. And that is why many artists sing more truthfully after tragedy, but smile less. Not because they have grown cold, but because some smiles, once they fall with loss, never return the same way again. And from 1971 onward, each time Jan Howard stepped onto the stage, the audience still heard a country singer. But if they listened closely, they heard something deeper. A mother, trying to keep living through the sound of her own voice. But grief does not leave behind only tears. It leaves solitude. And that solitude would slip into every remaining corner of her life. Love, marriage, and the years that followed beyond the spotlight. Tragedy did not only take a son. It left behind a long silence in Jan Howard's life. And within that silence, old fractures began to surface more clearly. Jan Howard had moved through several marriages, married young, divorced, hoped again, and broken again. On stage, she was a woman who spoke her mind without fear. Her voice carried weight. Her gaze did not waver. But off stage, she once admitted she was far more vulnerable than many imagined. And there is a paradox in the world of country music. Audiences love strong women, women who dare to sing about betrayal, injustice, self-respect. Yet when the lights go out, those very women often face an empty room alone. After the death of her son, solitude was no longer a passing sorrow. It became a companion. Relationships struggled to hold peace. The expectations placed on a public figure made private life even more fragile. And sometimes, the stronger you appear before the world, the fewer places you have left to be weak. Psychologically, women who build their identity around strength and independence often, unintentionally, create an armor for themselves. They learn to control their emotions. They learn not to collapse in front of others. But that armor has a cost. It protects you from hurt, yet it also makes it harder for others to come close. Do strong women in country music always pay for their resilience with loneliness? Not necessarily. But in a world where public image demands you remain unshaken, admitting vulnerability becomes difficult. Jan Howard could sing about love with confidence, but in real life, she was still a woman who had known repeated disappointment. And perhaps what makes her story resonate is not only tragedy, but honesty. She did not construct a flawless legend. She lived with scars, and those very scars are what kept her voice from ever sounding false. But time moves on, and instead of allowing herself to be defined solely by loss or heartbreak, Jan Howard began stepping into another chapter. No longer a battle to be famous, but a journey of learning how to keep living. Time does not heal every wound, but it teaches you how to carry them. After the years of triumph and tragedy, Jan Howard did not disappear. She did not retreat from the stage. She did not announce a farewell to music. She continued stepping onto the Grand Ole Opry stage each week. No longer as a star climbing upward, but as part of the place itself. In the later years, her name no longer appeared as often at the top of the charts. Radio began favoring new faces. Country music evolved. Faster, more commercial, younger. But one thing did not change: respect. Within the industry, Jan Howard was regarded differently, not only for her hit records, but for the way she stood steady through circumstances that might have broken others. She did not craft the image of a heroic survivor. She simply continued singing, continued showing up, continued living, and that perseverance made her a quiet symbol for a generation of female country artists, women who did not need noise to prove their strength. Some artists are remembered for their golden era. Jan Howard is remembered for her steadiness. She did not change to chase trends. She did not try to sound younger to remain relevant. And she kept the voice that time had refined. And perhaps at a certain point, she was no longer singing to be famous. She sang because it was the only way to stay connected to the part of herself that remained intact. No longer a battle to climb higher, no longer fresh pain still bleeding. Just a woman standing beneath familiar lights, accepting that life, though imperfect, was still worth living. And as the light slowly softened with the passing years, what remained was not merely the echo of a golden past, but a quiet, enduring legacy, waiting to be remembered. And then one day, the lights softened. Not because the audience turned away, not because she had lost anything, but because time always moves forward. Yet when people speak of Jan Howard, they do not speak only of a #1 hit, not only of For Loving You, not only of the weeks she spent climbing the charts. What keeps her in the history of country music is an image. The image of a woman in the 1960s who dared to sing her emotions plainly, without avoidance, and without softening her words to make them easier for someone else to hear. In an era when many female singers were still confined to the mold of gentle, enduring, Jan Howard offered something different: directness, self-respect, no apology for her own feelings. She helped shape a model of the country woman who not only knew how to love, but knew how to question, not only how to hurt, but how to speak that hurt aloud. And for decades, she remained part of the Grand Ole Opry, not as a memory placed on display, but as a foundation. Some artists change the current of music by breaking it, but others keep that current from becoming distorted. Jan Howard belonged to the latter. She did not chase trends. She did not create noise to gain attention. And she did not turn herself into a controversial symbol. She simply held on to the core of country music: honesty. And perhaps in a musical world that is always shifting, what endures most is not novelty, but sincerity. When the stage lights dim, what remains is not the light, but the way a human being lived and sang without ever being false. The stage once again settles into a soft amber glow. No band, no introduction, only a single microphone standing quietly in the open space, just as it has stood there for decades. In 2020, Jan Howard passed away at the age of 91. A long life, a journey marked by upheaval, many fractures, many times rising again. But her story did not close on the day she left. Because some artists do not live on through titles. They live on through the way they face their own lives. Jan Howard had her hits. She had her weeks at #1. She held a lasting place at the Grand Ole Opry. But what truly makes her unforgettable? Is it really the numbers? Or is it the way she stepped onto the stage, even after her heart had once been torn in two? Some become famous because they shine, and some are remembered because they refuse to fall. So what do you believe? Is Jan Howard remembered most for her hit records? Or for the way she stood firm after enduring what no one would ever choose? If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts. And if you believe artists like her deserve to be remembered, share this video so stories this honest are never forgotten. Because sometimes, a person's greatest legacy is not found beneath the stage lights, but in the way they step down from them.